And good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. Let me just click my box so that I can tell everybody that it's okay to record me. Good morning. My name is Jeff Abramowitz. I'm here with Andrea Lopez today on Top Talent. This is workshop number 3. Get ready, get set, get out. And we're going to get rocking and rolling. We have a lot to cover today. We're going to go for about an hour and a half, 40 minutes, and then we're going to have plenty of time for questions if you have. So let's get kicked off. If you could, put in the chat box your name and answer this question. If you could start your career all over, what would you do? And how hard would it be to reach that goal without any support at all? So if you could start your new career, your second mountain, your second journey, what would you do? And how hard would it be if you didn't have any support at all? So take a second, throw those in the chat box. We are going to have some breakout sessions today. It's going to get kind of lively. So make sure that you're prepared. We're hoping that everybody will participate in the breakouts when we get there. Let's see, we got it. Give you a second to kind of type in. I know this. Chris, how you doing? Mark, some old friends on. Christopher, how you doing? Saw some of my friends recently. All right. So we're not getting a lot of answers, but that's okay. I'm in my second career. And it would be difficult. Yeah, it would be very difficult without support. Definitely keep that brewing in your head today, because I want you thinking about it as we go along and as we have our day. I just want to do a little catch up on the workshop number 2, which was about the intersection of education and justice. In that series, it was the last workshop we did. It was really talking about education behind the walls and how important it was and what kinds of education is happening inside the walls and when people come home. And then also the education skills gap and what's really necessary when you talk about education and getting people skilled, and also building that career pathway, that next step for everybody as we go forward. So kind of interesting. If you didn't get a chance to see workshop 2, it was pretty awesome. We had a lot of interaction. It was some great discussions, and feel free. It's on the website. You'll be able to check out a tape of that. So today we're getting ready, get set, get out. So I should tell you where this came from. So as many people on the call may know, some may not, by way of history, I was a lawyer for a long time, made some bad choices in life about 10 years ago, ended up doing 5 years in the federal system. And when I went inside the prison, one of the things I did voraciously was write. I journaled every single day that I was there, and I came up with all these different ideas and concepts, and one of them was get ready, get set, get out. And Get Ready, Get Set, Get Out was actually the name that I gave to a class that I was doing inside of the prison while I was there to help men that I live with understand what their next journey was going to be about. How could they prepare themselves? What could they do to kind of get into their next chapter and kind of really dig into some real challenging issues, which we're going to talk about today. We took this and went a step further. We're going to talk about from the individual's perspective behind the walls and the reentrant. And then we're also going to talk about what employers need to do. How do employers and people that are stakeholders in this game, how do they get ready? How do they get set? How do they get engaged in this whole process? So, and then we'll kind of delve into a little bit about what's next. So really looking forward to this discussion today. I want to just go through a few things. First project, we're in the 3rd workshop of 6 that we'll be doing. And there will be an employer convening coming up. There'll also be a handout. I will tell you that I was looking today at my slide deck, and I think the last 15 slides are all resource materials. So if you haven't checked them out, check out the prior decks, and this deck in particular has all the resources. It's cumulative, so if you pull this deck up, you'll have everything we talk about today, all the links, all the resources that we talk about, the places to go to find some of that information. So I welcome you to go there. We're on workshop 3, workshop 4. The next one's going to be the right fit, which is really about the hiring process. And we'll be diving really pretty deep into the hiring the hiring process itself. And we have Andrea Lopez with us again today, who'll be kind of moderating it. Just some rules of engagement for today. The first is my Ted Lasso line. I don't know if I have any Ted Lasso fans on today, but he's got there's a great skit in Ted Lasso, one scene that he talks about Walt Whitman, quote, seeing it up on a billboard, and the billboard said, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I kind of been living by that rule recently and that saying. I hope that you'll be curious today, and you'll ask questions, and you'll be curious in your work and ask questions with the men and women that you work with. And again, not judgmental. Cell phones, not so much a problem for me because you're all kind of muted, so not a problem there. But if you do have a question, unmute yourself, jump in at any time at all. And the slide deck, Christine, is going to be posted on the website. So we'll download that right after the session's done today. Be respectful of others, and remember that words really do matter. So things like ex-con and offender are all things that are trigger words for a lot of people in the industry. And if we're really going to change culture, then we need to be mindful of the words that we use. And last, what happens in Illinois stays in Illinois. It's kind of like Vegas a little bit. I want people to speak freely and not worry about it going further than this venue that we're talking through today. All right, so you've met me before, and this is the fourth workshop, pretty much, that we've gotten to hear a little bit of my story. We're going to be guided today a lot more by Andrea Lopez. Andrea, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? Nice to see you all.
So really excited about having you on, especially today, because I think we're starting to get in your wheelhouse when we talk about human resources and HR. And can you briefly just let everybody know the space that you're coming from and your background?
Absolutely. Very briefly, I retired from my faculty position at Temple University in the Department of Human Resource Management just under 2 years ago. And since then, I've been consulting on workforce development projects focused on job matchmaking, helping employers successfully hire and develop candidates from marginalized communities. And I've been hitching my wagon to Jeff in doing so.
You have, and it's been a pleasure. So let's get started. So I'm a huge baseball fan, and baseball season is off the ground. Started, I guess, about a week ago, and this is a photograph from one of my favorite movies, which is A Field of Dreams. And I always think about the saying, if you build it, they will come. And I don't think it's different when we talk about getting people back to work and having the systems in place that can really help us be successful in the work that we do. Quite frankly, we haven't really built out the systems that exist both behind the walls and when we're and inside of the walls, and trying to understand better what it is that will help justice impacted individuals start their next chapter. So again, I want you to be thinking of how we can make change happen, which is a little bit of policy, but a lot of culture and a lot of just doing it, just getting down and actually doing it, starting to, get your hands dirty and really kind of try some different things, be innovative, be creative, be different. And I hope that you'll be thinking about some of that as we turn around. I gave a keynote address I guess it was about a year or so ago at the CEA conference down in Tampa, the Correctional Educators Conference. And at the conference, before I walked into the ballroom, and before everybody came in, I had everyone in I had the people that work for the hotel turn all the chairs around at the tables. So they were all facing the back of the stage. And as people filtered into the room, they turned their chairs and they were facing the front of the stage. And it was kind of a social experiment. And the experiment was pretty clear when I explained to them that as they walked in the room, every single person in the room had turned their chair around. Now, the idea or concept was pretty simple, because they saw something was wrong and just wasn't proper, and they took action to change it, right? They turned the chair around. And in the work that we do, we have to be thinking about, how do we turn the chair around? Like, what are the things that we know are wrong that just don't make sense? And how can we turn the chair around? What action can we take to really make change happen? And I want to be mindful of all of that. in the last session, workshop 2, we talked about the training camp and the spring training camp, which really re-entry begins day 1. It begins the first day someone goes inside of their prison or jail. They begin to think about their journey. They begin to think about where they're going to go when they come home, and what's that going to look like? What job are you going to have? What kind of career? I mean, I was a lawyer for 20 years, and I knew, and in my heart, I knew that I just couldn't go back to practicing law. And it just wasn't my calling anymore. I needed to find that next chapter, that next career. And how I was going to do it was the mystery. That was kind of like the thing that I was working towards. But in the last session, we talked about the 3 important pillars of the work of coming home. And that's really, centering on education, adult education, career technical training, and looking at digital literacy. We talked a lot about them at the last session. We're not going to talk so much about them today. On Friday, this past Friday, I was asked to speak at the New Jersey Reentry Summit, from the New Jersey Reentry Corporation Summit. And I don't know if there's any Newsroom fans that are with us today. Newsroom was a great show several years ago, but they asked a question to the panelists and it was on a panel of career technical training and the importance of that and apprenticeships. And they went down the panel row and they said, how important is career technical training? And everyone's going, oh, it's so important. It's vital to what we do. And, we got to get people into careers and we have to get them trained and skilled. And they went on talking about apprenticeships and the work piece of it and the career technical pieces of it. And they came to me, and this room, there was over 1,000 people in the room. The room was really deathly silent. And I was really intentional, and I waited, and I was thinking hard about the answer when he asked. It was just Governor Jim McGreevey was the one presenting or asking the questions, and he came to me. He said, "Jeff, so why is career technical college so important in the working with people that are justice impacted?" And following the Newsroom clip, if you haven't seen it, I would suggest you Google Newsroom and their first episode. And I said, quite frankly, it's not. It's not the most important thing for men and women coming home. And the truth is, career and technical training is wonderful. It's important, and I get it. But if you don't provide them with education, if people can't read and they can't write and they don't have digital literacy skills, then you can provide them with all the skill training in the world. But the truth is that they may not pass their admission or entry test. They may not pass for a licensing test. They may not be able to advance in their career. Heck, they may not even be able to actually do their job efficiently because they may not be able to read or write or do the math that's required in the job itself. So I think we need to really remember that this is a holistic approach. There's a lot of things that come together, but it really starts with education and moves on from there. So we mentioned last week, I'll just go through this quickly, but education is so important. But if you are a low level learner, you're 2 times more likely to be unemployed, 3 times more likely to be in poverty, 4 times more likely to be in poor health, but 8 times more likely to be incarcerated. Wow. 8 times more likely because you lack education. And the truth is, many men and women that are Black and brown, that are marginalized populations, have struggled with education in the course of their lives. And those are the people that are often low level literacy learners, and why education is so important. And then the fact is that if you take just one class inside of a correction institute or in a jail, you're 43% less likely to go back into a jail or prison. Pretty impressive. So we're going to start and kick us off today with a few little breakout room, and we'll give you about 10 minutes to talk about this. But what things should we be doing at our spring training camp today to give players who are the returning citizens or people justice impacted at a shot at succeeding in the game of life on the outside? And who are the partners, or who are your partners that you want to lean on to help you get there? So remember, we're at spring training camp, and our players that are in the spring training camp are all people that are justice involved, that have come home, and they're getting ready to make their next step. So what is it that we need to help them succeed, and who are the partners we're going to rely upon? So Kirsten, if you can break us into rooms maybe 4 or 5 rooms, 4 or 5 in a part in a group would be great. And we'll be about 10 minutes. So if you could just be mindful of someone's going to be called on to share out or could be asked to share out. So if you can, that would be great. And let's see if we can get that going.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you do require closed captioning for accessibility reasons or need them for any other capacity, if you could reach out to me via the chat individually, that way I know to keep you in the main Zoom room because breakout rooms do not have closed captioning capabilities. So please reach out to me via the chat and I will make sure that you stay in the main Zoom room. And then I'm going to open up these breakout rooms now. Jeffrey and Jeffrey, I'm going to keep you in this main room. And then
Right.
Janelle Mead, Jennifer Vega, and Robert Whitmere, I'm going to keep you in this main room as well. So just so you know, you will not receive a breakout notification. But other than that, I'm going to open all those rooms now. So you should see a breakout notification to join your breakout room.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. For those that are in this room, I think Janelle, Tom, Jennifer, Robert, Antoinette.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So I think we're here. Anyone want to kick us off at what players need in succeeding in the game of life on the way out? Anybody have any thoughts? And who's going to be your partners?
Oh, wait.
There you go. Antoinette, kick us off.
I think one thing that we start looking at when people, one of the things that they need is support. And that takes a lot of different, it takes a lot of different faces, whether it be familial support, community support, educational support, medical support. They just need support and they need to understand where their support is coming from.
So I'm curious, like there's 40,000 barriers to people coming home. So much support is needed in so many different things. Is there a priority for you in your mind? Like, what do you think the things are that are the number one support systems that people would need as they come home?
I'm looking at some of the things in the chat, and I noticed one of the things that like Jennifer and Rob Whitmere said is mental health, housing, food, insurance. One thing I think just off the top of my mind is housing, because without housing, it makes it difficult for any of those other things to exist.
I would say that housing is probably the number one challenge for most people as they come home, because they really need a place to live, right? And our halfway house system is so broken. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Robert, for adding some of those in. That's really very I think you're pretty spot on with some of them. Transportation, for sure. Transportation is right up there as well. Any other thoughts? Who in those settings that we're talking about in particular, who are the partners that you want to look to or you want to talk to about helping meet or fulfill some of those needs?
I think a lot of time the easiest approach would be community involvement. Well, I say the easiest approach primarily because I am in Chicago. And so it's a lot easier in environments like Chicago is to reach out to the different community organizations that are available. Because typically if they don't provide the actual service itself, they act as a liaison to other service providers. And so, community organizations would be the first layer that I would say, because it's almost like one-stop shopping. If you're not in a community with a lot of community organizations, that becomes difficult.
So I don't disagree. I think that when you're in, hey Craig, how you doing? I think what happens is a lot of times that there are a multitude of needs that have to be met when people come home. And a one-stop shop is awesome, but it's also kind of, as I travel the country, kind of rare. It's kind of rare to see one place that deals with all of these issues. Like, I do think this is kind of a village approach where it takes a village to kind of make it all happen. And I know the one that was mentioned twice, actually, I think everybody's mentioned it, is the issue of mental health services. And I'm curious, what kind of supports are there in Chicago for behavioral and mental health when it comes to people that are justice involved?
I chuckle.
I got some laugh.
I chuckle because I don't know if you're aware, but several years ago, many of the mental health facilities in the city of Chicago were closed. And so I want to say there was a major documentary done on Cook County jail system, and it said that Cook County Jail was the largest mental health institution in the country. And so when you start asking about mental health support, I know specifically in the city of Chicago, and as I speak to a lot of my community organizations and counterparts in other parts of the state, it's rare. Mental health is something very rare, specifically for the reentry community.
So
it's available, but there's a cost associated with it. And I think that deters a lot of people because they're already struggling to get situated and they don't want to put that additional cost into something. But I know in Chicago, in the south suburbs, we're working with NIME and Grand Prairie Services, but all their services are on a sliding scale. And even if you get government insurance, it's not covered.
Yeah, no, great point, Jennifer. So to both of your points, I don't think that Illinois is alone. In Pennsylvania and in other states, New Jersey, we closed all our behavioral health hospitals, right? When we closed them all, where did they all go? They went inside prisons and jails. It was not rocket science what was going to happen if you put people on the street that have those kinds of challenges. There's an estimate that 2/3 of people that are incarcerated have some behavioral health issue. 2/3, and yet there's zero treatment behind the walls. There's some addiction therapy in some facilities, but by and large, there's very little treatment for behavioral health issues at all. And that makes it extremely challenging when you're tasking people to come home to get employed, right? To try to get back into their life and figure out what's next for them. Definitely, I think there's a unbelievable need across the country for behavioral health services and supports. And partnering agencies as well. Anyone else have any of those things that you need besides, and we talked about a bunch of them, but any other supports strike you that people need when they're coming home or preparing to?
One of the major ones that Jennifer had mentioned in the chat earlier was transportation, because transportation we identify as being a huge hurdle for when you're talking about employment, especially in communities without reliable public transportation. So transportation is a huge one.
Yeah, it is. So go ahead. Yeah, Craig.
No, I was going to say that I agree with that. And that's something that I've heard from quite a few returning citizens. And that's a challenge in a lot of different opportunity populations, right?
It is,
Particularly in the rural areas.
Yeah, so I was going to say, especially in the rural areas where it's really hard, there's not a lot of transportation. There are some cool things happening though across the country. Here in Pennsylvania and in New Jersey, we have a program called Ride to Work, which is run by Enterprise Rental Car, and they actually have a van service that provides support for employees to get to work, and it's in partnership with the employer. And they give you a van for the week, and actually the person driving the van gets to keep it on the weekends. And it's run by Enterprise Rental Car, which is a pretty reputable company. They maintain the vehicles and everything like that. And the individuals pay a fee, what they would normally pay to get transportation to work. And the employers pay a fee as well to make sure. That's kind of neat about it, is they're all getting there on time because the van's picking everybody up at the same time. So transportation, definitely one of the biggest problems, and it does vary by state to state, county to county, city to city, wherever you are.
And
Correct.
in Illinois, Pace has a similar, they do have a van pool program, but you need to your point, you need the employer involved and you need multiple people involved. And I think part of the challenge with returning citizens is some of them they don't have a license, right? Their license has been revoked and need to clear up some of that stuff before they can even obtain transportation or insurance on that transportation. But I can tell you a success story of where, through employment, I have several returning citizens that have come to our organization, and because of their employment with us, they were able to secure an automobile, right? They worked for a month or so, and then we received the credit app. We were able to validate their employment and their ongoing employment, and two of them were able to secure vehicles.
Yeah, which is awesome. I think we talked about a lot of the big things, the 30,000-foot view, like the big balls that are up in the air, behavioral health and housing and training and food and those kinds of things. Transportation, definitely a big issue. But we didn't really talk a lot about the smaller ones. And Craig hit on one, which was a driver's license identification. Two things that are needed for employment: driver's license and social security card, two forms of ID. And if you don't have them, you're not working. And yet we often deny people those rights, that the ability to get those identification pieces because of maybe fines that were levied on them prior to their incarceration or during their incarceration, or lapses in their driver's licenses, those types of things. So I think there's a whole bucket list of other smaller pieces that we often don't think about. A tie when you come home, a Gmail address, and having a Gmail address so you can get, access to your employer, or just internet access, bank accounts, being able to have a bank account so you can put information in. It's all of those things. Somebody also mentioned insurance, and I know there's a real big movement now nationally to start thinking about how we can get people filing for Social Security disability while they're still incarcerated, like before they get released. SSD is something that takes a long time for people to get. And if they could just start the process before they got out, wow, how awesome would that be? There's also a great program called Patient Sortal, which actually pulls the individual's medical records and allows them to bring them with them when they leave, so that they're able to have their medical records. They know what medications they were on. They know what they're being treated for. They know what they got, the doctor's notes. So super helpful things. So I think we're starting to get it, like we're starting to chip away. But those partners are so important. And in places like Chicago, I know, Antoinette, you mentioned, Chicago is the kind of place where there's a lot of community organizations that are doing this work. But when you go out to Normal and, some of the other places, Bloomington even, I guess, not so much, but as you get smaller throughout Illinois, the challenges become really different, right? And finding those resources could become really really challenging, trying to get people to services that they may not necessarily exist where near in the area where they are. How about digital literacy and or digital access? Is anybody on the call struggling with getting people digital access and digital literacy types of skills?
Absolutely. That's a huge barrier. That's a huge barrier. Even some of the community organizations, they've started trying to offer computer literacy courses. But again, if you're not in a community with a lot of support, it becomes difficult.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I hope you guys are taking a close look, if you're a provider, at the Digital Equity Act and what funding might be coming down for that from that act. So there's a lot been happening on the digital front, especially in justice and reentry. Anything, we only have a minute left, but anything that anyone else wanted to add, anything else that you want on that bucket list that we have of things that we should be including in our spring training? Pretty long, definitely robust. All right, we're getting everybody back in, so. Thanks, Antoinette. Agreed. All right, we're getting everybody back. I think give another second for people to jump in. So good discussion, everybody. How'd it go? Oh, we got some more people joining. Got a lot more groups coming in.
Are something that could be worked with.
Oh, I'm sorry. Say that again, Antoinette.
That might have been somebody who was coming out of a breakout room.
Oh,
If you
got
were
it.
if you were just mid-sentence in your breakout room, it might have cut you off for your group because they closed. So
Sorry.
they're all back.
No worries. We got you. All right, so good discussion, everybody. There are so many things that we should be thinking about to help people when they come home and in that spring training camp, getting ready to get into the big game. And and partnering is really important. So anybody want to jump in? Anybody come up with anything? Let's stick with the usual. So we know behavioral health, mental health, housing, food. We are transportation. Anyone come up with anything that was out of the ordinary? Anybody, Andrea, anybody in your group have a discussion on anything that was out of the ordinary?
Well, we talked about the we have some really successful efforts that we learned about, and different people in different spaces that are having success. The gap was with the employer partnerships. And so many of the people were saying that that they need more consistent employer partners. But Angie, maybe you can talk a little bit about the platform that you're creating that's statewide, because that sort of is bringing everybody together in one place.
So thank you for that. So I'm the reentry administrator at DOC. And one of the things that we've been doing is, first of all, we've been working with DCEO and the local area workforces to establish more standardized services statewide. So actually this month, the regionals of both departments will be meeting with the facilities and local workforce partners in that area to determine what can be done at each facility. So we're hoping for like resume support and mock interview support, and eventually to get to a place where we're delivering standardized employment readiness. And we're a little bit a ways away from that, but the project is moving. In addition to that, DOC is working with another partner to build an employment resume database. So it will essentially be the Indeed version for IDOC, where individuals in custody will be able to upload their resume, and we'll work with employment partners who are willing to hire people with a criminal history or that are coming out of our custody. The overall vision is that we would eventually be able to obviously help people apply, have a resume to leave with, but then to actually do interviews for employment pre-release so that people are leaving to employment or hopefully a soon start date. So we're really excited about that. We've received a lot of inquiry from community employers throughout the pandemic, and we're excited to be able to hopefully meet the needs of the labor market that way.
Thanks, Angie. Yeah, so what we're seeing across the country is we're seeing DOCs starting to jump in the pool and really get more engaged and be part of not only these discussions, but part of their the workforce system itself. They're partnering with our career links, our American Job Centers. They're understanding that there needs to be a bridge from inside to outside and really all those supports. We're going to talk about some of them today. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that Illinois is kind of jumping on and really being aggressive about trying to provide these supports in a meaningful way, trying to engage employers behind the walls when they come out. Was there anyone else that had anything that kind of struck you? Just one more, as far as something that was we don't normally think about, either a partner that's in the game that is important for us to connect with, or a challenge that people have that we have to work on in training camp.
I could just, we didn't really talk about it in the group, but it just kind of struck me is that, your analogy of spring training and kind of focusing on the expansion of our adult transition centers in Illinois is that opportunity to move larger numbers of individuals into that arena, which would expand the pool of individuals able to address our employer needs, help give them the environment to really begin to acclimate back, and then address some of those other issues like we talked about in our group, the education aspects of it, the statistics that show that engagement in corrections education reduces recidivism, and I really think that would give us an opportunity to be able to transition those individuals closer to home, also address local employer needs with the increased workforce capacity. That was what we were kind of talking.
Yeah, I also struggle with the notion that we don't include employers in the discussion of like our IET and corrections and, doing stuff behind the walls and getting people. Why aren't we really centering on those jobs and asking employers, what do people need to learn or understand in order to be successful in the job on the outside, and actually bringing it inside, bring the employer inside. There's a few employers in Pennsylvania and New Jersey that actually come behind the walls and they tell them exactly what they need to learn, what they need to know in order to be successful when they walk out the door, and those people are prepared. So I agree, Adam. I think there's a lot of those pieces that have to come into play in this training camp that we're in, which is behind the walls. There are some things that are part of that workout list that we have to work on in order to get ready for the big leagues. Adult education and literacy activities are really important. And I say them separately because adult education is one thing. Having your high school equivalency, being able to read and to write is one thing. But then the literacy activities, kind of digital literacy skills, being able to use a computer when you walk out the door, being able to have financial literacy, understanding what a bank account is and how to start a bank account. So I think there's other literacy-based activities that really are important in the training camp that need to be worked on. But then career exploration and preparedness is a big piece. Career exploration, when you're behind the walls, that everybody's got these ideas of grandeur. I'm going to get out and I'm starting this company that's going to be tattooing pets. And I'm going to be the first company that's going to tattoo pets. And they come up with these great ideas. But the challenge is when they walk out the door, getting funding, understanding how to do a business plan, getting support for it, marketing, all those pieces that come together. What often happens is people inside the walls don't know what they don't know. They've never been exposed to the newest of technologies like drone operation and some of these great new careers that are out there like surveying and other things. So one of the things that I think we need to do is we need to be able to allow students inside to really understand career exploration. What does it mean? What's out there? What job opportunities are really hot right now? And do I stand a chance for them? And shame on us if we're preparing people for careers that they can't get licensed to or can't get licensed to when they get out the doors. So career preparedness and really getting people prepared for working. And that means the silly things. One is shaking a hand. How do you shake hands professionally? How do you dress for success? How do you wear your pants so that your butt crack isn't showing? And I know this sounds silly, but it's truthful. You know, I talk to employers all around the country all the time, and they tell me, Jeff, I can train people to do just about anything, but I can't teach them how to be on time, how to wear their pants, how to deal with conflict when they're working with coworkers. I mean, some of those basic things that really need to be taught and shown and exampled. And it starts behind the walls as well. You have to understand too that practice for what's about to come, and that has to happen inside. So when you are addressing people inside, it should be, "Hi, Mr. So-and-so." It's got to be modeled by the facilities. And I'm glad Angie's on from the DOC, because it really is a culture change. Those people that are working within the system should recognize that we need to prepare people for what's out, and that means treating them with some respect and dignity and getting it back in return, and really modeling what's going to be happening in the real world when they walk out the door. And then the last piece of that is really a reality check. And that's letting people know and understand before they walk out the door, this is not an easy ride. It is not an easy ride. Quite frankly, if somebody told me what I was going to experience in the halfway house setting, I would have waived my good time and I would have stayed inside. Now that's a bold, harsh statement, but our halfway house system is terribly broken, and men and women need to know and understand that when they walk out that door, it is going to be hard. It's going to be challenging, and there's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to find a career opportunity, but they need to stick with it and have a plan and be really methodical about it. So part of the essentials on the list are things like a resume, applying for a job, interviewing skills, preparing for what happens next. So I want to talk about all of these for just a second. First, resume. A resume is not an obituary, and a resume is showing someone's skill set of what they have. And oftentimes men and women develop skills inside of prisons that they should be putting on their resume. The toughest challenge for people is to show in the past years what their value is. Look at prior job experience, prior skill sets that they have, and that needs to be incorporated in a resume in a really meaningful way. Ironically, on my resume, it says that I was employed by the United States Department of Justice for 5 years while I was in prison. Now that sounds crazy, but the truth is I got a check. I got paid in my commissary from the U.S. Department of Justice. Every month, they put money into my commissary account, and I was working for them in Unicor and doing other jobs. And I thought it was important to be candid about what my experience was. I will also tell you that you develop some unbelievable skills inside of walls. If you've ever been to a prison or jail before, you know they're some of the most pristine wax floors that you've ever seen. It's because there's a skill set and developed in that men and women pride themselves on when they're behind the walls and doing. Understanding that applying for a job is not so easy. Coming home, navigating a computer, not having an email, understanding how to download your resume, it can be a foreign experience for somebody. So being prepared for that, understanding interviewing skills. I believe that when you interview, you should be telling your story. Now, this goes against the grain of a lot of those ban the box laws that are out there that say, don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. We're not going to ask you until you get that conditional offer of employment. Hogwash. Because no matter what happens, and that's one of the bad sides of ban the box, is the truth is an employer still feels slighted. They feel like you weren't honest with them. You weren't truthful with them. And I think to get off on the right foot, when you should be working with people inside to prepare them to how they tell their story, what are those interviewing skills that are necessary for them to land the job and really be successful in the big leagues. We talked in our group about identification and basic needs, having a driver's license, having a social security card, having clothing and food and all those things that come in. And then bewilders me that when men and women walk out the door, we should be meeting them at the gate. We should be waiting for them and saying, here's where you go next. And if it's not physically meeting them, we should be giving them an exit package that says, here's where you need to go. This is the person you need to talk to. This is what you're going to do to complete your HSC, your high school diploma. This is where you're going for a job. This is where you're going. We need to be able to have that handoff. And then last is encouragement. Encouragement and support. You know, people are struggling when they come home, and some of the best advice that I got was just hang in there, just keep chipping away, just keep grinding. You can do it, you can do it. And being really giving people the support they need to move forward. Resume, I call it resuming play after a foul ball. The resume basics, looking for occupational skills in the past, prior training, jobs and training behind the walls, and then letting people tell their story. This gentleman in the picture, it's one of my favorite pictures, is his name is Steven, and Steven was a guy who was addicted to heroin and did some time away. When he came home, all he really needed was a guitar. Ironically, and that was because Stephen was homeless. He was living on the streets, and someone had stole his guitar in a halfway house shelter that he was at. And when I saw Stephen, it was a Saturday night, and I tried to give him some food and ask how I could help him. And he told me he needed the guitar, but I didn't really listen to his story till the next day when he called me. And he said, "Where's my guitar?" And I said, "I need to talk to you first." And then he explained that he'd done some time away and was addicted to heroin, but he was a sous chef at one of the best restaurants in our country. And heroin and drugs are rampant in the restaurant industry. He was challenged when he came home. They took his knives. He couldn't get a job because he smelled. He was living on the streets. And just with some simple support, we were able to kind of help him guide his way when he came home into a culinary job where he could be successful again. So really, including things of prior skill or on your resume, unbelievably important. The application process too is also something that's foreign to people. We talked about the need for Social Security, driver's license, birth certificate, those kinds of things, which are often really difficult to get, either because a driver's license has been suspended, you can't get it back because of the fines. A birth certificate, God knows where it is. It's with my belongings, which are now who knows where they are. Not having a home address. And it can also be a real challenge. Do you put the halfway house or the shelter you're in, or what's that look like? And not having a cell phone when you come home. I think two things: everyone should have identification when they come home, and everyone should be given either a laptop or a cell phone that they can communicate and make phone calls to family and others, even if it's just for a short period of time. Last year, or during COVID, we got 500 phones donated from T-Mobile, who's a great partner, and they gave us 4 free months of service, and then it reverted to the individual. So thinking outside the box and contacting T-Mobile as a partner and saying, we got reentrants coming home, they need to make phone calls. How do they do it? And then understanding that there's going to be challenges for a few months, but they're going to have the phones after that was a win for T-Mobile and a win for our clients. The things that are not so basic, we talked about some of them, were transportation and clothing, banking information. Where do they put their money when they come home and their first paycheck? Looking at your credit history. A lot of companies now are asking for credit history and credit checks, as well as background checks. You're going to hear about that. Asking what the work restrictions are. What are the things you can't do in the halfway house or parole setting, and making sure they have clearance to actually do the job. And then also food insecurity. Not so basic, but part of the game. Things that are not in the game, applying for a job online can be so challenging. Just accessing the internet and those digital skills. Addressing the felony question, and as employers and workforce developers, are we asking the question? Should we be asking the question? I think Andrea is going to be talking about some of that today. When the question comes up, and what are the consequences of really being transparent? When you are transparent, are you not going to get the job? Should you be fearful of all that? And the truth is, yeah, you should be, because a lot of times, employers just don't want to hire individuals with a background. And if it's a challenging background or something that really raises eyebrows, like a serious offense, they really want to shy away from it. it is a team game, a team sport, and all these players from housing to legal support, medical support, education, they all have to play a big part. We do have some people that are with us today that are working our American Job Centers, and I want you to understand too that additional training is something that is often needed when people come home, and the individual training accounts that are out there, ITAs under WIOA, could be super helpful to helping people get back to work and get some jobs. We have a number of partnerships with LabCorp and CVS and some manufacturing companies that they don't want to know necessarily about your background. They want to know, can you do the job? And we're seeing new career opportunities open the door up because there's such a demand in the labor market. Traditionally not very reentry friendly fields like CVS, but they having warehousing and logistics jobs that are available. They're having a really tough time to fill, as are many across the country. So we're going to move a little bit on to get Andrea involved here, because I think some of these things are going to be really important to talk about, and that's get the employer perspective. Like, how do we get employers and stakeholders prepared for people coming home, and what does that look like? And the stakeholders I think that we'll be looking at and talking about today are people like our American Job Centers, reentry programs, the training partners that are out there, our educational partners, community partners, and obviously all of the wonderful employers that we have in our state. So Andrea, you want to lead us off about the team and why partnering is so important?
Yeah, sure. So as evidenced by all the participants in these workshops, you're already part of a community that's rich in resources. One of our goals through these workshops is to help you connect the dots and to find each other. In the resource list that Jeff will make available to you, if you look at these slides, you'll see links that'll be useful to HR practitioners, as well as some that workforce development agencies can share with job seekers, and also community organizations that provide a range of services in the Chicago and Illinois area, from talent sourcing, housing and legal aid, behavioral, mental health, and ongoing job support. And for employers, if this is a new venture for you, then try to connect with employers who are already doing it. And if you're working with employers if you're already working with employers, encourage them to connect with other employers. Hiring candidates with justice backgrounds is an innovative solution to this problem that's become very common, which is managing a labor shortage. An innovative solution sometimes requires a culture tweak, if not a culture shift, in order to be successful. So the most obvious place to start is the language that you're using. So if we go to the next slide, it starts off with a language in your job description. Oh, nope, we're
That's
doing
okay.
this first. Good plan.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's a good place to kind of take a stop for a second and a pause, because we're going to talk about language and how important that is. But what employers and stakeholders are doing to prepare for the season, I think, is worthy of us all to put our heads together. And I'm curious, and I think Andrea and I are both curious. So what are stakeholders doing to prepare for on their end? Like, what does it look like from your end to really start getting in the game? And Andrew, what scares me a little bit is there is this tremendous push right now because there are more jobs in our country than there are people to fill them. So we're seeing a great demand in the labor market, but what happens when that shrinks? Is this talent pool going to be set aside again? Are we not going to be thinking about it? So I think now is the time for us to start thinking of, how do we get engaged? How do we start building this network and preparing for the next season, which is these new players that are coming in the game? So we're going to take about 10 minutes, and I'm going to call on Kirsten to break us out into groups again and take about 10 minutes. And I'm curious, what employers or stakeholders, what are you doing? The people on this call, what are you doing to prepare your company, your agency, your employees? What are you doing to prepare people for the new season and working with people that are justice involved? So take about 10 minutes. I do want to do a call out on this too. So when you come back, we're going to be asking people to give us their short list, but come together and give us about 3 or 4 things, your top 3 or 4 that you're doing to get ready for this next season. Kirsten, you want to break us out?
Yeah. So Adam, Jeff, Kyler, Meredith, and Ray, I'm going to keep you in this main room here. Everybody else, your breakout rooms are now open.
Awesome. We got some people not joining. Oh, they're going jumping in. Okay. So we'll kind of kick it off. I know that hey Ray. So as stakeholders, you guys are all pretty involved in this system. You're working in agencies that are doing good work. But what is it that you're doing or should be doing to kind of prepare for the men and women that are coming home? Anyone to kick us off?
Well, actually, I'm an instructor at Greater Westtown. It's shipping and receiving training.
Nice.
So we actually we have job readiness, but we also connect with employers to see are they felony friendly to hire the students after they train. So we reach out to a lot of employers, but sometimes we get a date set to go visit, but sometimes it works and sometimes it don't. But we actually prepare our students or trainees to dress appropriately, how to talk, everything in job readiness, resumes, digital literacy. But we, like I say, we reach out to employers. It's just some get back with us and some don't. So I actually was thinking that I think all employers that are felony friendly should connect with all the agencies that's helping people that's reentry back into the society. So we had a couple students that put in for a job and was happy, and then just to get shot down because it's background. And it's kind of, I ain't gonna say crazy, but I actually been trying to reach back in contact with him after he graduated and email or phone call. So I don't know if that kind of messed him up, but it's kind of hard. But I think that all employees should be who was that talking? I think it was Angie about she getting an employee thing for a partnership, like Indeed. I think that'll work good.
Yeah, I question whether Indeed is the answer. Like for the men and women that I work with, I don't know that Indeed is is the best place for them.
No, I wasn't. I thought she was saying they was partnering up with Employee Resumes, something like Indeed.
Oh, right. Yeah, preparing the resumes there. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, good points. Kyler?
Yeah, so I was going to speak. So I'm from Goodwill Industries of Northern Illinois, here in Rockford, Illinois. And my job is I'm actually an employment specialist for a justice program. So our individuals are between the ages of 18 to 24 that have justice involvement. And one thing that I do that I connect with a lot of local employers is I kind of tell them the benefits of taking a chance on those individuals. So I have statistics that I always bring to them. As far as 92% of inclusive employers say that it has enhanced their reputation with helping them win new contracts, showing that they're a second chance employer. So that's one thing that I always kind of want to bring to the table, just showing everybody deserves a second chance. And one thing that we try to do to really enhance that participant that we're trying to get employed is that myself, I do employability skills training with them. So we kind of do a career readiness with them, but I walk them through everything in terms of how to prepare a career plan, a job search plan, and ultimately achieving their goals in obtaining employment and maintaining that employment throughout their career.
Kyler, what do you think? What would you like employers to know? What is it that the questions that come up from employers, like what are the things that they need to know or other stakeholders need to know when working with people that you see every day?
Well, I'll say, for instance, like one I have like a really great partnership with. They give me a lot of feedback on the reason they take, a chance on individuals. And they say because they have a different mindset. When they're, been involved with, things over the course of their life, there's a big change that they're willing to do. And they just need somebody to care and believe in them. And that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing with the partnership that I have with one of the biggest trucking companies here in my area.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I get a lot of these questions. I was in a workshop recently that I did in Lancaster County, and the employers some of them were actually afraid of what happens with probation and parole. Like, parole officers coming out and hassling their employees and pulling them off the job site and having to miss all this time from work. I think there's just this general education that has to happen for employers as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I say we got we got blessed with the individual who has who actually runs the logistics part of the partnership that I have. Her brother was just as involved. So she took that, like, she didn't take that very lightly. And she's very understanding of the situation that we have with the individual that's working there. So we kind of got blessed with that situation. But, I have these monthly employer meetings with other partnerships that I'm trying to maintain and also, kind of create a little bit. And I kind of express these situations, and I tell them our success stories with the individuals who we have. A couple people they were facing 60 years at one point. Now, they're here to change their life around, and it's all because somebody took the time to actually get to know them and, prepare them for that career, and they can train them how they want to.
Awesome. Anybody else? What do employers or stakeholders need to, how do they prepare? How do they get ready? What is it like? They're in spring training themselves. Like, you just don't dive in and start saying, oh, I'm going to be reentry friendly. Like, what is it that can get employers prepared or ready, or stakeholders for people as they come home? Adam?
It's
Adam and then Meredith.
Sorry. It comes down to support, not just for the individual, but for the employer. One of the things, everybody loves apprenticeships. Everybody loves it. And they have a very low success rate in many cases, because it's basically, a lot of times it's set it and forget it. We get the apprenticeship, the employer is all on board for an apprenticeship. We find a placement, we put the person in the apprenticeship, and then many times it's kind of hands off. The employer is now in charge of it, and they don't really know what to do. They don't have those supports. They're not in the education system. They're in the business of business, making money and doing what they do best in their industry. So it's important that we continue to support that. Just by getting an individual with a background, a placement, and a job, they still need to continue, and the employer still needs to have those supports also, in better understanding those situations, like you mentioned, with the probation office, with issues that may arise, with the need to maybe call off for a court date or something of that nature, or a meeting. And that takes support for the employer, not just the individual that we're placing, because they have to understand, the situation that our clients face. And that's really one of the parts that I see a lot of lagging is like, we meet an employer. Oh yes, no, we're very interested. We're open to hiring individual backgrounds. We love the tax incentives. We love the idea of bonding. We love all these different programs you have. But then once the person gets in there, they still need to have that continued support from an HR standpoint to better understand how to work with individuals that are recently released.
Great point. Great point. Meredith?
I don't disagree with what Adam was saying. I do think, though, that there needs to be, or there should be, in best case scenarios, there would be an organization, right? Like Greater Westtown, like Chicago Women in Trades, like Hire 360, like JARC, like one of these things where within that model, you do have employment specialists. You have people where when people are placed, they are having still support services from those organizations, and the employer is having support services from those organizations. So if, like, let's say somebody is having an issue with transportation, getting somewhere on time, maybe instead of just the 1, 2, 3 you're out, they go back to the organization that recommended them and try and work on a solution. So there's, one option there. I think the other thing, and I work for the Office of Apprenticeship, I disagree with Adam. I think apprenticeship actually is a great model when it's utilized correctly, and it has a lot of success. But I do believe that sometimes there's outside services that need to be tapped into for certain people. One thing that I do, and that I did when I was working with women in manufacturing, and when I work with different organizations, different employers, is I ask them, and I ask about, sometimes it does take a conversation, and it takes an advocate on a different level to try and open up their minds to the thought of what does it look like to have somebody with a background. Sometimes it's like, oh no, we don't take anybody with any backgrounds. And it's like, oh, well, and sometimes I'll go to places and they never check backgrounds. They don't do it as a matter of anything. So I know who they are, but also the ones that take nobody with backgrounds. Sometimes I'll ask, oh, is there any background that you would take? And sometimes they're like, well, we just don't want theft. I'm like, well, what if you just don't take people that have a history of, robbery or, whatever it is. And sometimes it's getting people to open up their minds and getting people to change their policies based on what they do find palatable or allowable versus what they don't, or what they think they don't. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes
Yeah.
total sense. Get Adam.
I just wanted, Meredith, I am a big supporter of apprenticeships. I was just trying to say that when they're not supported on both ends, where the individual, it sounds like you guys have an amazing model, but a lot of times I see that a lot of industries, when they go in with an apprenticeship, that they don't get that support, that continued support from both ends, like you guys are doing. So
Well, I do think that if organizations are sending people and have been working with people, then it should be their obligation as an organization to do the follow-up with the employer, to do the 30-day follow-up, to do the 60-day, to do the 90-day. And that should be whether they have a background or not. But I understand what you're saying as well. I just think it's it's hard. It's hard.
no.
Yeah. No one said this was going to be easy, folks. This is work. This is work. So I know we're getting some more people jumping back in. Great discussion. Thank you, Kyler, for jumping in, and Adam and Meredith. We'll give everybody a second to jump in the pool, get back where we are. I think the rooms are just about all closing. No question that there are there's a lot of issues here when we talk about stakeholders and what they need to know to be prepared and getting them ready for the game. I think everybody's just jumping back. Yeah. Oh, they'll close in 15 seconds. Yeah, a lot of great discussions in our room and our end, talked about a lot of different things that were really important in this discussion. And 2 seconds, 1 second. There you go. Okay. I'll be back. Cool. So thank you, everybody. This is a great discussion. We had some great comments in our session, in our breakout room. And part of it was Adam had mentioned the fact that, employers really need support. They need to know, they're not going to know where to send someone for addiction support or clothing or housing or all these other things that they might need. And definitely having support for the employer and knowing what resources they should have on tap would be, in this education piece is really important. Anyone want to share out something that preparing stakeholders, what do we need to do to prepare for the major leagues? Anybody in one of the breakout groups want to just jump in real quick?
One of the things our breakout session discussed is one of the ways that employers can kind of help the process is to is to be very clear about the approval process, the background check, because I think sometimes what happens is the applicant is hired, and then the background check doesn't come back for several weeks, or this person has gotten used to the position, they've gotten comfortable, and now they need to leave because of the background check. And so either that's something that an employer should be set against not hiring somebody until that background check comes back, or they should put pressure on some of the state agencies to get them back quicker.
Yeah, we're going to talk about background checks in a minute. Andrea's going to give us her whole wrap on it, because I think it's definitely a needed discussion as part of the what we're talking about today. There are a lot of issues that are inherent in dealing with employers and the HR picture of what we could be doing. One is really taking a close look at our hiring policies and practices. So we're going to talk about that today. Things like occupational licensing, and looking at what does it make sense in a state that you restrict people from getting a renewal on their barber's license, for example, and what are the limitations of occupational licensing under state laws? Looking at things like pardons and expungements that could help clear records for individuals. I do believe that every person that comes home should actually do their own background check. And I did it when I came home, and I found things on my record that I didn't know were there that were like a traffic ticket for speeding or something like that. You should all get a copy of your background check to see what's on there. And I think you'd be surprised if you've ever had any encounter with the law when that actually hits your record. And if you do nothing, that it may stay on for the rest of your life. So understanding the laws of when something hits a record, what's on your background check, it's a lot better if you go into an interview and you actually know what's on your record so you can explain it, than having someone that's sitting across from you actually rely upon a piece of paper that may not have all of the information they need to evaluate that background check. And we'll talk about that in a little bit today. Looking at local laws like Clean Slate and Ban the Box, and making sure that they're inclusive in the the HR picture that you have, and really understanding the dynamic of background checks and drug screens. Just before I turn it to Andrea for a second, I do want to mention that background checks and drug screens are one of the biggest barriers for people actually getting hired, and do something far worse than somebody not getting the job. There's an emotional component that happens when someone comes home and they get a job that is just like this unbelievable sense of accomplishment. And they're in that job now for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then the employer gets the background check. I've seen it as far as 3 or 4 months. They get the background check back, and all of a sudden the person's being let go. And it is demoralizing. It is humiliating. It is, it's almost like this whole incarceration just won't go away. It's still this big weight on your back. And that's why I believe in transparency on the background, and that you should just be upfront with your employer right up front, not wait for that background check to come back. And it's okay if you say during an interview, look, these are the criteria that we have for this position. And we don't, because of whatever reasons you want to come up with, these are the things that we won't hire for if you have a criminal background in, and just be upfront about it. It saves everybody some time and onboarding and training and everything else. And then same thing with the drug screens. There are a lot of people that are struggling with addiction issues when they come home, and drug screens are often a barrier to them actually getting or maintaining the job. Andrea, I want to toss it back to you, because you were talking about language, and can you tell us a little bit more what you're talking about?
Right. So the next few slides are geared toward employers, and I realize we don't have a lot of employers here, but a lot of you do work with employers. And so it's not a bad idea in working with employers to sort of do a pre-check with them to make sure that they're on the same page as you are, to help the job seekers that you're helping get a job and to get through the process successfully. Because there are a lot of employers who are in the game and who have all this down pat. There are other employers who are very interested in participating, but might not be as sophisticated as we need them to be in dealing with people with justice backgrounds. So the first thing is from speaking to HR people, Is the language in your job descriptions consistent with your inclusive hiring goals? And this is an example, and many times people have EEO statements, organizations have EEO statements at the bottom of their job descriptions that are not that friendly. And this is a way, this language here is more inclusive. So right off the bat, if you're a job seeker and you're applying, if you see this language, it's going to be very different. And as an employer, if you put this language out, it's going to be a very different vibe that you're giving to the community. So that's one thing in terms of the job description, in terms of the EEO statement. Also, to remove questions about criminal records on the application form and delay, we've been talking about this, delay the inquiries about the background until the conditional offers have been made. That doesn't mean to delay the conversation. If you can train your hiring managers to talk about this and to accept the information, because obviously the more someone can tell their story and relate to the person who's interviewing them, the better off they are. But it doesn't mean delay the conversation necessarily, but it does delay, but the recommendation is to delay the actual background check. So that's one thing. Then create an inclusive selection process. This is an overview of the steps in the selection process that you want to consider if your goal is to hire candidates with justice backgrounds. And the next few slides are going to focus on some of these steps. But again, when you're working with employers, these are some things that you might want to talk about to the HR person in talking about what their process is. They might need help from you in order to do this. Now, if the employer is and if the HR professional that you're dealing with is a member of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, it's very possible that they've already gone through the Get Back to Work. Jeff mentioned this before, and Get Back to Work training, so that they're already familiar with this. But it's really not a bad idea for you to go over this just to make sure, again, that you're on the same page. So the next slide talks more specifically about the interview. Okay, so what you want to do, and if I don't know how intimately you're working with employers, but ideally the job descriptions that the employer is sharing with you identifies the primary skills and core competencies for the roles that they're hiring for. The approach to successfully hiring candidates with justice backgrounds is actually aligned with general trends that are already taking place within a lot of HR functions. And those trends are a shift towards skills-based hiring. The idea here is to move beyond education and experience requirements and focusing more on skills that match between candidates and roles. Okay, so more employers are actually finding, and this is true, and this is largely because of the fact that employers are trying to fill more roles than they had been in the past. But a lot of employers are finding that assessing candidates on their abilities and their potential, rather than on their degrees and their job histories, actually yields employees that are well matched to the position and the team. As many employers are facing these labor shortages, relying on skills to assess fit can create larger labor pools of talent, increase diversity, and strengthen community ties. So this goes back to what Jeff was saying about how people should be writing their resumes, because employers are now primed for this. They're looking for skills and they're looking for skill sets. And so in that regard, writing a resume and helping the job seekers write resumes that focus on their skills provides a really good match, because that means people are speaking the same language. From an HR perspective, we're taught as HR professionals to focus all of our decisions, whether hiring, performance feedback, disciplinary, termination decisions, on work-related behavior. And those of us who have worked in recruiting and staffing know that no matter how much we try to standardize the process, hiring decisions can still be a leap of faith. There's no one specific question or set of questions to ask candidates that will ensure that they're going to succeed in this role and in the role that you're hiring for. So for any candidate, we want to learn more about them as a person, what motivates them, how their skills, competencies, and attitudes might bring value to the organization and create success for both parties. So when you're preparing your job seekers, when this goes back to what Jeff said before, telling their story is really important. Their story about who they are, what motivates them, what makes them happy, examples of their competencies, examples of where they've used certain skills before. It doesn't necessarily have to be an actual job, but in all of their experiences. So by invoking a simple HR principle, which is evaluate the individual instead of prejudging the category. Okay, and we can do this by identifying primary skills and core competencies for the role and reframing questions to focus on those skills and competencies. And thinking about transferable skills from any previous work experience. So you don't have to, if you're going to be a welder, you don't have to have been a welder before. So there are a lot of transferable skills that are part of every single job. And that's what you're looking, that's what you want the job seekers, that's the language you want the job seekers to have. And that's also the conversations that you want to have with the HR professionals that you're working with. And also, work-related competencies, reliability, and ability and willingness to learn quickly, showing up on time. And this is where transitional employment opportunities comes into place. Transitional employment opportunities, by definition, are not jobs that will sustain you. They often don't pay a living wage, but they are useful. It's almost like an apprenticeship program. It's an opportunity for the job seeker to show that they do have those work-related competencies. So that's definite. There's a role for them. Again, delaying the background check until after conditional offer is made provides the employer the best opportunity to evaluate candidates without bias, because you can't unsee the information that's contained in the background check once it's provided. Before I go on to more talk about the background checks, I want to talk about something else, because another aspect of focusing on skills and competencies rather than on traditional educational credentials is the proliferation of certificate programs and alternative credentials. We see this in all industries and in all levels of the organization. 90% of HR professionals say that people with alternative credentials bring value to the workplace. And 78% of HR professionals report that their organizations encourage employees to pursue alternative credentials as part of their career. We're all inundated with professional development, certifications, continuing education credentials. The problem is that many of these HR folks and hiring managers may never see applications from these candidates. And that's because of applicant tracking systems. So if you work with employers who use applicant tracking systems, you really have to have a more in-depth discussion, because a lot of the ATS fail to recognize alternative credentials and therefore fail to advance those applications to the next stage. Certain industries like IT are more comfortable assessing these non-traditional certifications, but if you're an employer who uses ATS or you work with employers who do, you got to make sure to find out if they can modify the settings on the systems so that it better meets your needs. All right, so that those tracking systems don't automatically skip over people without traditional educational requirements. And of course, as always, you want to confirm that the ATS in use is identifying alternative credentials for all.
She froze on my screen.
Yeah, she froze on mine as well.
So yeah, so let's, I do want to pick up on something she said, in particular about the transitional employment, because I think transitional employment, and we'll agree to disagree here, is that it's a good thing for some, but it's only good if people understand that it is transitional and that there's another that there's got to be something more, because what happens often with transitional employment is people think it's a long-term career opportunity, and then when that happens, the challenge again is that they're let go after the 90th day, and then they have to start all over again, and now they've already started getting some responsibility and stuff. So be careful with transitional employment. Don't stop working with individuals just because they've gotten employment in their transitional setting. They should be looking to what's next. Where do I go next? How do I transition to the next level? While we'll wait for Andrew to get back on, but I want you to be mindful that when you do have that, you make that offer and you get that conditional offer of employment, that background check is so important because oftentimes it does lead to a withdrawal of an offer, or actually when people have started, actually letting people out and not having them continue in their job. So be really careful and make sure that you're using a reputable service. Make sure you let people know that you're going to be background checking them at the very beginning of the game so they can share about their background and they can actually identify or let you know any issues that may crop up during the background check. Don't just assume that the background check is correct. There was some data that came out recently that said between 35 and 45% of all background checks have errors in them. So, and that's because in our system, some things don't, they don't get called out or put out. Oftentimes the person that's doing the input in the background from the criminal justice end is a clerk. And they may not always know the nuances of things that are going onto those records. So be really careful. Question when you get the record back, is this accurate? Give the opportunity to the individual to question it, to respond to the background check. Let them know that it came in. Let them know where you got it from. And most importantly, be ultra transparent during the process that we're going to be background checking you, and that these are the guidelines that our company or our policy uses. There is a compliance requirement under the federal law that you should be aware of. You need to get consent. You need to actually give them the applicant the opportunity to receive a copy of it and to let them know what their rights are under the law. And obviously you want to be courteous about it and let them know if there's a challenge that they're having that you found with doing the job, that kind of thing. You want to be able to be upfront and candid in this whole process. Background checks are a huge issue for most men and women going through the employment cycle, and it's just a part of our life today. And if as big a part is Google, so if they're not getting, if they're not being found on their background check or what their past is, then they are going to get found out in a Google search. So be really careful and be able to address as an employer what happens when someone does, a co-employee Googles someone, and I just Googled Mark, and Mark came back that Mark had this, and this in his history and was involved in this case. And maybe it was just a charge. Maybe it was just the incident happened and it was in the news and he could have been exonerated or found not guilty or whatever it is. But Google is a huge challenge for people coming home. And that's because it's just free information and it's unfiltered, it's uncensored, and you can really find out all the things about people that, maybe are only half truths and not the full story. I often tell students that I work with that we want to get them to page 2, where they are on page 2 so that they, in the whole process of things, when someone Googles you, you've done enough great things in the world that you're now on page 2 of that Google search, which could be super important. Andrea, I'm not sure if she's back on, but if she is, was going to be talking about best practices for an inclusive talent acquisition, things that you need to look for in this process. We're going to be diving deep into this on the next session, but how you should be partnering up and focusing on your recruiting efforts, looking at removing criminal histories in the process, and then being really intentional about the whole HR hiring process and individualizing it. Community and reentry partners have a responsibility too. So their pregame or their spring training is beginning with a warm welcome when people come home, saying, "Hi, how are you doing?" Giving them that handshake and that warm, you're welcome. You have some challenges, but welcome into your agencies and into your setting. Be patient. This is not, it's not something that happens overnight. When people come home, it takes a process. Look, it took me 7 years to kind of get some of these things off my plate and get back to normal, including a credit score that's somewhat reasonable. Be curious. ask the question, what do you need when you come home? What are the things that you really need that we can help you with? And don't give up. The reality is there are so many challenges on probation and parole and supervision when people come home that it does take some time, and people may make missteps and they may not understand some things when they come home or face those challenges, but they just need to find that right position on the field. And that means really working with them to find their way. From the workforce development end, you people in the workforce that are on this call today, you need to listen. I mean, really listen. And I mean, really listen, not just the words that are saying, but what's behind the words. What are people telling you when they come home that they're struggling with? And ask those hard questions like, well, tell me more. What is it? Pry a little bit, understand like what they really want to do, where they're really headed in a career path, what their challenges are. And it may be as simple as, look, I can't read. Or I don't know basic math, or I don't know how to turn my computer on, or I don't have a Gmail account. Whatever those challenges are, listen, be the coach and guide the player. You want to be their cheerleader. You want to be their coach to kind of direct them. So be their coach during this whole process, and be respectful and aware of their challenges. It is challenging coming home. And things that you might think are kind of silly are really big things for people. For me, it was getting an iPhone and understanding how to use it. It was brand new. It was a brand new device for me. I struggled with trying to understand some of the features of it, but those are kind of things you just want to be respectful and patient about. And last on this is assume nothing. Assume nothing. You do not want to assume they have a way to work the first day, that they have a place to put their payroll, that they have boots for the first days of work, that they have clothing, that they have food, that they have diapers for their kids. Assume nothing when people come home. Ask the question. Be curious and not judgmental. And then last is for our training partners. You want to be able to assess and play to people's strengths and really figure out how you can support them. Hi, Andrea, we're back. We covered a bunch. We'll bring in the circle. And then we want to guide people to that career pathway so that it's not just a job. Andrea was talking about transitional employment. And Andrea, I did call you out a little bit because my concern is transitional employment doesn't necessarily lead to a career pathway.
No.
And they actually get stuck in that transitional employment. And that's part of the challenge if we don't work with them to find that next step, correct?
That's right. I mean, and I'm sorry I left you for a while. I was somewhere. Anyways, I was nowhere good. Yes, no. The transitional employment is, like I said, it's not a living wage and it's not sustainable. But there are organizations like Baker Industries that help people create that transitional employment is useful in terms of putting something on a resume so that the candidate has demonstrated experience of showing up on time, being reliable, all those things that some employers might be concerned about. But the idea is that if it's transitional, let's label it as transitional and realize that the goal is to then move out of it within a certain period of time. It's certainly not a long-term solution, but if there's some people who are hard to place, the transitional employment might be useful in that regard.
For sure. We're just going through and talking about some of the things that people have to know. We're going to stop in a second. I'm going to open up for questions. I want to give plenty of time, but from the education and training partner end, be aware of the reentry challenges. And then truly you want to be a fan in the system and really be a fan of the individual that's making through. I'm going to pass this. I'm going to open up for questions in a second, but we are having office hours. We've been struggling a little with technology, but if I'm not on the Zoom, or if you can't get access to the link, just call me. My cell phone number is on the call, and a few people have been trying to reach us in the Zoom, haven't been able to link in. I think it's because of the link that was originally sent, but this is a good link. It should be fine now, but if you want to reach me, I know Mark and a few others have been jumping in. Please feel free, just call me on the phone or shoot me an email and we'll figure it out together. And then I just want to quickly show you that this is page one of about 10 pages of resources that we have for you guys. So there is a lot. There's a lot we're sharing, and we're really excited to be able to put this in a useful form for you. So hang tight, but I didn't want to go through the workshop without providing these all to you. So they will be part of the slide deck, and feel free to use them and take a look at them as we go forward. So I'll be quiet. You have Andrea and I, and my phone number is right here. So there's my cell. Both cells in case you need it, and Andrea's email is there as well. So feel free to text or email either one of us. But I want to open the floor up for a little bit. Any questions you guys have? Questions? There are some neat companies out there doing background checks now that are starting to change the game. Checker is a company that's out there that's trying to change the narrative a little bit of what's included in background checks and really being responsive in the background setting. So there are some companies will share some of that information for you and some best practices in background checking as well.
Hello.
Yeah, Ray.
Well, I have something to say. It's actually not a question, but
Sure.
something that I've been learning because I just started dealing with employers. So something I learned, well, I saw that one of my mentors used to do. I think that agencies need to build a relationship with employers. That's something that I noticed that he did. He had a relationship with employees. He used to go visit the employers and the students that graduated and went and worked there. And like if one of the graduates like kind of got in trouble, that the employers have phoned him. I'm saying that everybody probably don't want to do that, but he actually had that with like every employee that he actually was dealing with. Like if anything, if the person been coming late or something, and he used to get on top of them. So that's something that I've been trying to do with employers, because it get him and he built so much of a relationship with them that when things go wrong, they didn't really it wasn't a quick fire, because they'll call him and he usually will get on top of the individuals and straighten it out. Or if it go too far, then he actually would be the one to let them know that they was fired, so, but for some, if it worked, but that's something that I want to start doing. But I think that we need to have a better communication with employers, like y'all was saying, knowing what type of people they want. And then we have to make a selection from the people that we have to send to them.
That's a great point. I actually am curious too, Ray, if we flipped it on its head, we said, you know what, let's give every employee a mentor, right? Let's give them a mentor that when they come to work for us, we're going to give them a mentor that can kind of guide them a little bit, because the reality is that a lot of people lose contact with the reentry providers that they work with on the outside, and life goes on, right? It becomes busy and life goes on. And I'm wondering if maybe the better tact would be to look at doing it in-house, and maybe somebody else that's in your company that's just as involved that you can bring on as a peer mentor to kind of work with them and make it a little bit easier for them in the whole process. Does that make sense?
It actually make a lot of sense, but I think it's more if the individual, like I say, like we have a lot of students or graduates that's from from a long time ago and everything that's still in touch, but it's if the individual wants to be in touch. Like we have some that we call right after they graduate and they don't even respond back. But most people actually, when something when something usually help them, most people usually stay in tune with them. So we have a lot of individuals, students that stay in contact, and we always call 30, 60, 90. Then we just give them a courtesy call to see how they doing. Is everything going well?
Awesome. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Patrick, you put in the chat box, Bonds for Jobs, which is the bonding site. I'm curious, Patrick, what's your experience with bonding? And so those that don't know, there is a bonding system out there that gives people a $5,000 worth of bond, gives employers $5,000 worth of bonding coverage. And I've not been a tremendous fan because I don't know that necessarily it's the first 5,000 that's the issue. I think it's what happens after the 5,000 that's employers really get to worry about. I do think it is a
Hold
kind
on,
of neat
before
thing.
you go on any further, Jeffrey, you could be bonded up to 25,000.
Oh, cool.
$5,000 increments
Gotcha.
for 6
Oh,
months. And the best part about this is at no cost to the employer or the job seeker. It's federal money. I have the bonds, grant money. And when these people hire, they also like to bring in WOTC too, work opportunity tax credit,
Yep.
because they can get a federal tax credit for hiring a returning citizen. There's like 12 categories. I mean, veterans, DCRs, which is a designated community resident, SSI. I mean, there's a whole list. I could put the WOTC website on chat too in a minute.
yeah, we actually have it in our link of our resources too. So
Right.
they'll be able to
I
get
thought
it through that.
out in there, but yeah, but that's the basic gist of the program. I've been the state bonding coordinator for years. All our local offices have this information too, in American Job Centers. But when you want to bond somebody, it has to come back through me, and I do the verifications. And all that. I issue.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit. So how used is this? It's a great tool. I think it's awesome.
Okay. Not to pat myself in the back too much. I think I'm second or third in the nation in using the bonds.
Good for you. Yeah, as I travel around the country, it's interesting because a lot of people just don't take it. It's like the WOTC credit. Like a lot of people don't take advantage of it when it's out there. And I think that if they did, they'd understand a little bit more of how valuable this tool could be.
The WOTC is huge. You just got to get people to go through it. The initial part of it, everyone wants someone to do it for you.
Yeah, it's actually a timing process too, right?
You have to hire a lot of these people. There's an age restriction on most of them, and then for returning ex-felons, it's hiring them within a year of release.
Gotcha.
But I can bond anybody, even just for you have bad credit or something like that. There's no limit on who I can't bond someone that's in jail, but obviously that's not going to happen. So
awesome. No, good to know.
Sorry,
Patrick, thank you so much, and thanks for sharing. We'll make sure we have. I'm pretty sure I have the links on there. But Craig, did you want to respond to that?
Well, I was just going to say that as I talk to employers, I mean, I've heard during employer information sessions where American Job Centers have talked about the bonding program. But when I've discussed people with employers at SHRM groups, whether it be that or WOTC as Patrick described, because you have to track, ask the question, how long has it been since you've been released, then track that information. The juice just isn't worth the squeeze from an employer standpoint to have to do all the reporting. They make in both these cases, the feedback I hear from employers is that it just takes too much to go through that. And as you said, I think the perception, right, wrong, or indifferent, is it's not the first 5,000. I've heard people say it's everything else, but even at 25,000, depending on what that is, employers are going, I just don't want that risk, right? So we have to just in general lower the perception or change the perception within employer organizations of, look, the risk that you have is no greater than Joe Blow off the street, right? We read it in the media all the time of of things happening, whether it be theft, whether it be shootings. I didn't get caught up, but there was just a shooting this morning down in Louisville, right? That oftentimes it is not people that are incarcerated. So you have a similar risk, whether you're hiring incarcerated individuals or not. And what I have found is let's show more data of how successful previously incarcerated individuals are in the workplace, because they have drive, they want to change their outcome. That's why they've sought regular employment, right? I just have not, as I've talked to employers, the bonding program and the WOTC, I know people take advantage of it, but to your point, you were asking how many people take advantage of it. I don't think as many could, because of the amount of data that's involved. It's very laborious.
Now, to go back to why I thank you very much for that. To get back to WOTC, we have automated in Illinois. It has automated the whole system now to make it a lot less paper.
That's wonderful to hear, because that might, as an employer, or maybe the employer on this call, that may cause us to further.
It's literally so much less paper. It's just
that's good to know. Thank you.
It's just all the algorithm, whatever, how do they do that, is all set now with all the MOUs with the other agencies and all that is all in place. So it is a lot simpler to do.
I will say, one of the big things that employers have said, or excuses that they said of not jumping in the pool, is the issue of liability. And employer liability has been a hot topic. I know here in Pennsylvania recently put a piece of legislation into the governor's office about hold harmless agreements, and a hold harmless legislation that says that if you're an employer and you hire someone, but for certain circumstances, you'll be held harmless for that hire, and that negligent hiring argument kind of goes out the window. I mean, things like that, new tools like that will give more kind of confidence and assurance to employers that want to jump in the pool, that there's some protection there, and that they feel confident in hiring and retaining talent that maybe has a criminal history or criminal past. Interesting. Any other questions? Anybody? Well, we got a few minutes left. And I love to give you a few minutes to eat lunch and relax and do what you need to do out there. But it's a pleasure being with you. We do have some more, I think Kristen put on in the chat the next sessions that are coming up in May. We look forward to seeing people, if we can, live, and also the employer convening, which is also coming up in May. We will be having one final session, which will be virtual, and be putting together this whole package of documents that you can use. It'll be digital, so you can use it. You always have it on your laptop or your screen, so you can access the links. And we definitely will make sure things like bonding, which is important, is included in the things that we include. Any other questions before we go?
I did just also.
Awesome. It was good seeing old friends and new friends as well. We encourage you to share out this workshop series with everyone you know. And the next one we'll be diving in, but we will be live for the next one, and we'll see everybody in Illinois this coming up in May. So everyone have a great day, and I'll hang out for a little bit in case there's any other questions. Thanks, everybody.
Jeffrey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I did just want to say to everyone that some of you have been asking for some of the links and things that have been posted in the chat, but when you went to your breakout rooms, your chat disappeared when you come back to the main session. So I did save the chat. I have everything, the whole duration of the workshop series here today, and so I will send that chat in the follow-up email tomorrow, and then we'll also have a follow-up survey for this workshop. specifically workshop number 3. So if you wouldn't mind taking a couple minutes out of your workday to fill that out, we would greatly appreciate it. And we'll make sure we include specifically the information about the office hours this Thursday as well that Jeff highlighted a couple minutes ago too. So we'll kind of have that one-stop shop in the follow-up email tomorrow for everyone. And if anybody has any questions regarding the workshop series, you can feel free to reach out to me via email as well, and I'll put that in the chat.
Good deal. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. It's good seeing everybody, and I will see you in a few weeks.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.